Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose.
How you doing this morning, Jared?
Confused, Mr. Ali. I'm confused. Man, I physically feel good. Mentally, I'm feeling good. Getting a lot of time with my family. I'm studying my Spanish. I'm loving it. But on the business front, like so many of our listeners, and both of us owning businesses, there's a lot of uncertainty. So I'm a little confused. Should I be feeling good about things, or how this is all going to play out still?
Yeah.
How are you feeling, buddy?
I understand. In a similar position, but I just keep remembering that how I'm feeling is my choice. So in the face of all of this uncertainty, I'm just choosing to feel happy and grateful. That's really I can do. I think I've run through all the gamut of emotions. I've had the fear, I've had the sadness, I've had the anger during this quarantine time, and now I'm doing a better job of trying to just consistently stay grateful and happy, because there's so much is out of our control.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think what you said is the key, though, is allow yourself to run the gamut of emotions. I don't have to hide from the fact that I'm angry at times that I can't open my business, or I'm happy at times that I can work on fitness. I think it's normal, and we need to go through those emotions, the roller coaster, if you will.
Yeah. I'm as you know, I'm continuing to work on my humility, and I've worked a little bit this last week on sharing some of those emotions, which I don't like doing.
Yeah.
But putting out there like, oh, I'm feeling sad, and putting out there. And it's funny because how my mind works, man. Like the next day I'll look back at some of that stuff and be like, oh, you little bitch, why are you sharing that kind of shit? But it's funny how trying to do the work to be more humility and really express emotions can definitely take some effort, and it's consistent work even after you share some stuff to stand behind it. But I think it's okay for us all to realize that we're going to be in different spots at different times. We're going to have different emotions. One day we're going to feel one way, another day we're going to feel different. So it's been good, man. It's been good. I'm grateful. Although I do have a little bit of a runny nose, and it freaks people out, man. Even on Zoom calls and digital calls, I'll sniffle, and people will be like, "Whoa, are you sick? What's going on?"
Yeah, dude, it's interesting times. I'm excited to get through it, look back, and see what lessons we learned and what better people we can become because of it. But right now, I think it's normal to go up and down with things.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what has been helping is just being.
Yeah.
Just being. Our last episode that we recorded, how was your purposeful practice with that? You have any realizations with that episode?
Man, honestly, I get confused at times because I want to take all this time and learn more stuff. And I'm like, okay, I have this month to do nothing. Like, I got to do everything. And then I feel guilty if I just sit and do nothing, which is the being part. You know what I mean? So I'm still kind of torn. For me, I'm still working the balance of what's okay to just be in the moment without all the distractions, and still feel like I'm accomplishing and pushing myself forward. So for me, that's still definitely much in the works.
Yeah, no, I hear that. It's an interesting balance. And I think we can just be in the doing as well.
Yeah.
And really be present, because sometimes I'll find myself even looking at a conversation as a task.
Yeah.
Right? I'm on a conference call, and I'm like, all right, what's the purpose of this call? We're really getting into it. When I'm like, all right, hang on, let me just be. Let me listen to the tone of voice to who I'm speaking to, the hand gestures they make, and really be present and aware in the moment, even though I'm doing something. Right. But what I find is that it's easy to just be going through the motions when you're doing stuff. And then it's good to come back and just be. One of the best ways to do that is the breath.
Yeah.
Right. The breath is so whenever we're doing something and we feel like we're just going, is just to take a deep breath. And then you're really being again, really being aware, really being mindful of everything that you're doing. Like right now, I'm looking at you, Jared, just took a drink of coffee, just swallow, he's thinking I'm really being here right now, instead of during conversations, like you said, I really liked on the episode how you were saying, instead of me thinking about how I'm going to respond while you're talking, I'm just listening.
Yeah.
That I think is being, so that it's been good for me, man. And I've been pushing through on my accountability sheet. Now I'm starting to do 10 plus minutes of meditation.
Oh, nice.
And for a long time, it was just about getting any meditation. There's even a 1 minute meditation on Insight Timer. So sometimes I just be like, oh, fuck it, I'm just gonna get 1 minute. I'm too busy, So I'll do the 1 minute. But my accountability group, and this is why I like accountability groups, said, Courtney actually called me out. She's like, so you've been checking all your boxes for meditation for a few months now. Is there a way that you can push yourself? And I was like, nah, you're absolutely right. I've been thinking about it for a while. I need to try and get 10 minutes a day.
That's awesome, man. That's good. And I think, like I said, we've talked about this. We'll all grow from these circumstances and what we learn, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah.
Cool. What do you think about today's guest, my friend?
I am excited. I don't even know what to think, man. Looking at his bio, I'm already just very impressed with what he's done in life, and really excited to get to meet him.
Awesome. Well, you ready to bring him in?
Let's do it. All right, On Purpose community, we have a special guest today who I'm really excited to learn more about. His name is Craig Demartino. He is a professional adaptive climber with 31 years of climbing. You wouldn't guess by looking at his face. Stays in good shape. 17 of those being a disabled climber. He's also a family man, loving husband, father of 2 kids, and a published author. And on top of that, Craig is a movie star. You can see him in 2 different movies titled Craig's Reaction, and there's also a free movie that you can watch on YouTube called Out on a Limb, which I'm definitely going to have to check out after this episode. But we're really excited to learn more here about Craig today. So thank you, Craig, for coming on the show. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure to bring you on and be able to share your story with so many people that come to us to find their purpose, and I know it'll resonate well with them.
That's cool. I think after that intro that Ali did, we just kind of wrap it up now.
Yeah. That's as good as it could get.
That's it, man.
Well, we're going to ease you into it, right? Like we shoot the intro super high, but then we want to ease you into it. Like we have what we call like a little warm up, like you just don't go out and climb El Capitan the first time. You got to warm up with some small ones. Good. Did I say that right?
You said it. You're like in the, you're in.
Oh,
you're
good.
In.
Hey, that's my goal during this whole thing. I'm trying to learn Spanish, so I've been practicing all the time.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Those of you guys that don't know what El Capitan is, check it out on the climbing circuit. It's nuts. I've watched some videos of you guys doing that. I'm like, holy smokes.
It's the largest granite monolith in North America, so it obviously attracts a lot of climbers, and myself included. So yeah, it's the place you want to go if you want to see just what you got figured out in the climbing world.
Yeah, I don't even need to go to know I'm not up for that.
I've seen enough of what you do, man. You're fine.
All right, so before we jump into the big stuff, we got to warm you up. We got to warm you up and let this community know who you are, Craig. So. All right, you're quarantined at home on a global pandemic, for hypothetical, if that ever happened, and you get one food for the rest of your life. What are you taking with you?
Oh, I literally don't even have to think about it. My wife will laugh. Pizza.
Ooh. See, that's what I like. I like pizza too. What do you think on that, Ali?
Pizza's good. I mean, you got some good carbs, decent fats and proteins. I mean, not a bad thing to have with you.
It's never sad. You can have it hot or cold. It's good day after.
And it's a happy food. Like you don't eat pizza and be sad. See, we've had some other guests. I'm not gonna lie. Like if you want, go back and they come with tactical food like peanut butter and like all this healthy stuff. I'm like, man, if we have one food forever. I'm always like I never have a bad relationship with pizza. No. And you can always exercise it off.
Exactly, and you never ate it and went, I regret that. You maybe I ate too much, but like I've never been like, man, that was a mistake. I'm always like, that's fine.
Yeah,
predictable. I like it. Yeah.
That's good.
Love it. Versatile food. I definitely have been on the ate too much end, though. I'll tell you that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
All right,
For sure.
Craig, warm up question number 2. If you could be any superhero with any superpower, who would you be and what? And you can mix them even if it doesn't make sense, like Batman who could teleport, whatever you want. Or it could be a superhero you make up.
And it can be completely self-serving. It's only going to better me.
Yes.
Probably the best
100%.
superheroes.
Spider-Man.
Nice.
Clearly, without even thinking, because I could, dude, I'd be like the best climber in the world, in history, right? Like, come on, that's even easy, super easy.
That makes
got the
sense.
web thing, so I don't need a rope sponsor anymore. I just, you know what I mean? It's all figured out for me. So yeah, that's an easy one.
Yeah, your self-contained climbing apparatus there.
Exactly. I like that.
That's
Very
good.
easy.
All right, and last one for you, Craig. What book are you currently reading?
I'm reading. This is kind of funny. I started reading these. Cindy got me a book for Christmas about. It's totally fictional, but it's about this sun. The sun heat goes away, so we kind of drop into an ice age, and then it's this thing that these beings come and block the sun, and so it's this kind of sci-fi, weird fiction stuff. And then the follow-up to it was the sun comes back, but then they have to leave Earth because Earth is no longer inhabitable because there's all this sickness and all this weirdness. So it's actually kind of weird reading it now because you're just like, I'm sure when this guy wrote this, it was completely sci-fi, but now I read it and I'm like, oh God, it's kind of weird, like a little bit eerie to compare it to what's happening today. So
Sure.
I thought these books were like complete stepaways from reality, but now the second book is kind of like a little bit too close to home right now at this point. So I'm almost done with it. Yeah. And I read books. I read multiple books. I don't know if you guys do that. Like I'm reading those two, but I'm also reading this old book from Tim Cahill called Road Fever. He was an adventure writer kind of before there were adventure writers. And so he drove from the tip of South America all the way to Alaska in a straight shot in a kind of jumped up Jimmy truck, him and this endurance driver guy. So it's their story of like how they did that. And so I'm reading that one too. So I ping back and forth.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm starting to think, man, that maybe you and all the sci-fi readers in the world have actually manifested this for us, man. Too much time reading these books and watching these apocalypse movies, and now it's happening.
Right? It's like all of a sudden those Road Warrior movies are like a documentary.
Yeah, right. Nice. We'll definitely have to put a link in those so any of our listeners who may be interested to check those out. So you feeling warmed up, Craig?
I'm feeling good.
Awesome.
All right. Well, let's jump into this because I know I'm definitely excited to learn more about you. So we like to start out with talking about purpose. You had. It sounds like you had this big injury that really shifted the trajectory of your life, and what you've been able to do after the injury is phenomenal. And you're in a sport that's very popular worldwide, and you have worldwide attention. So let's kind of start with what your purpose is and how you got there in a general sense, and we can just kind of dial it in from wherever you'd like to dial in from there.
Right. And for me, it goes back to that injury. So all of my kind of direction, and I think what I ended up doing was using the injury as a catalyst instead of having it be this thing that kind of defined and held me back. I let it live its life and then let it be a catalyst to push me forward. Because before I got hurt, I was a climber, I was a husband, I was a dad, and life, everything was moving along just peachy. I didn't have any complaints. And then in 2002, I got accidentally dropped 100 feet. So that's about a 10-story office building, right? So it's a substantial amount of falling happening. And I landed standing up. So I hit the ground and just shattered my feet and my ankles, compound fractures of both legs, and broke my back at L2, which is kind of right through your belly button, broke the ribs on my right, the neck. I broke my neck at C5, C6, and then just kind of crumpled down onto the ground. And that injury, as horrific as it wasn't just a wake-up call like, holy crap, I just got hurt really bad. It was a wake-up call in the sense that, okay, here I was living my life this particular way, which was a good way. It was fine, right? But when I came out of it and started to get back into my life and figure out, okay, what do I want to do going forward? I only had like these small windows where I could actually do something. And so I wanted those windows to count. So if I was in PT, I wanted that to count. I wanted, because I knew as soon as I was done, I was going to collapse. And so if I'm doing something, I want to give my all to it. And so what's that going to look like going forward? And so I started to take the pieces of my life that worked before, like the training I would do for climbing was very efficient and it worked really well for me. How do I apply that over my whole life? And so as I went through the recovery process of kind of stripping away what I felt was not important, I kind of got down to these things that I felt were important to me. And I think it'll resonate with people listening, because once you can identify in your own life, okay, what are the things that I'm going to focus on? That gives you an amazing amount of clarity. And that's what I got from the accident, was this clarity that I really didn't have before. I think I was like most people, most humans, just kind of going through life. I was, like I said, everything was working fine. But then when you get to a point where your body is so destroyed, you can't really do anything, you start to go, okay, if I can do something, what is that going to be? And it's not going to be the petty little bullshit that we kind of get sucked into. It's going to be the things that matter to you. And for me, that became my family, my wife, my kids, and climbing. And so I looked at those things and said, those are the things that I'm going to focus on, because I don't really need to get muddied down in all this other stuff. It's going to be there. I can't do anything about that, but I can really decide what my interaction with those things is going to be. And so I just decided that I'm going to focus on those things that make me happy, and that will propel me forward. And that has kind of forced my shift into, okay, I'm going to do that now and just let the other stuff fall away and see, and kind of see where that goes. And it took years, because I kept I'm an amputee on my right side. My right leg got destroyed a little bit worse than my left. And so, over this basically 2-year period, I was in and out of the hospital and doing surgeries. And once I amputated my leg, that was kind of my decision point of, okay, now I'm going to see what this actually looks like going forward. What are the things, if these are the things I'm going to focus on, what is that going to look like long-term now?
Wow. And you said you were dropped.
Accidentally, just a miscommunication between myself and my belayer. We were climbing, very good friends. We still are very good friends. And we were climbing together and just miscommunicated as far as how I was going to come down from this ledge I was at. So I led the climb first, and that just means I go up and put the gear in the rock, got to a ledge at 100 feet. And then I thought he was going to lower me back to the ground, but he thought he was coming up to this ledge and then we would rappel off together. And both of those things are workable. They both work. But when you don't communicate that, he ended up taking me off belay, which is how you are joined to your climber. It's running through a belay device. He did that to go get his shoes, and the climb was steep, so I couldn't see him. So we were only going off of like verbal recognition. And so when our commands were kind of back and forth, but it was a little bit muddied. And so when he, let me know that he was ready, I thought he meant, to lower me to the ground. He thought he meant coming up to the ledge. And so I just sat back off the ledge and went the whole distance of the climb that I had just climbed.
How had you guys climbed this rock before?
He had climbed it, I think the year prior. We were in Rocky Mountain National Park here in Colorado, and he had climbed it, I believe it was the year before, and he just said, I don't want to go first. I want you to go first, because he had some trouble on it. And so it was a beautiful, beautiful climb. It was just really far in the backcountry. It was about 4 miles back. So hitting the ground, number one, is bad enough. But if you did it right next to the road, that would be bad enough. But then you factor in this backcountry experience. So getting me down, he ended up having a cell phone with him, which was, I got hurt in 2002. And he ended up getting a signal, which is crazy to me. And the kind of carried to a spot where a helicopter could land took about 5 hours, took about 7 to get me to the hospital in Fort Collins. And then,
oh my God.
From there, it was, and I was awake the whole time because I punctured my lung on the right side. So they won't give you pain meds. So you're you're awake, you're talking to the guys on SAR, you know, getting you out, search and rescue's moving, doing all this stuff. And you don't know how bad you're hurt. People always ask me that, like, you know, were you in a lot of pain? Were you in and out of consciousness? And I was awake the whole time. And you are in a lot of pain, but it's very singular focus. It's like only thing I could feel was my back hurt. I didn't even know my feet were broken because they were broken so bad that your body doesn't even register it. Your body just goes, oh crap, like there's a lot of crap going on. Like we're just going to deal with the one thing. And so one of the guys leading the rescue, his name was Eric Gabriel. The only reason I knew I was hurt bad was probably, well, I don't know how long. He asked me if he wanted me to call my wife. And I was like, no, I don't think you should call my wife. I think that's a terrible idea. Let's just get this. We'll just get this done. We'll get this done amongst all of us, and then we'll call her later. Right. And then, like, as they were littering me down, he asked me again. And I remember thinking, I wonder why he asked me twice. I must be hurt worse than I think I am. And so then he did call my wife, and she ended up running in. And she drove to Estes, ran from the trailhead up to meet me. And we talked for 30 seconds. That was about it. But it made me aware of, like, oh, I must be hurt pretty bad. You just don't think you're that badly hurt. You're not sure what's going on. And that kind of was a little bit of a wake-up call for me.
So I'd be curious, Craig, what were your initial emotions, and what was the cycle of coming to grips with this? Because here you are, a super active, I mean, your life's on the path you've kind of chosen, and now it's completely derailed or potentially derailed. And I think a lot of people go through that. Maybe they don't fall, 100 feet, but in their life, they're going to have these pitfalls where their life's going the way they think and something throws an obstacle in their way. So can you talk to us about the emotions you went through, and how did you process them, and how did you work through them?
I think for me and for everyone, I tell people this all the time when I speak, is you will probably not fall off a cliff, but you will fall off a cliff in life. It's going to be something, it's going to be a health issue. It's going to be a job. It's going to be a divorce. Something's going to happen that's going to rattle you to your core. And it's really what you do with that long term. And for me, laying in the hospital, I was in the hospital for 3 months. So laying in the hospital every day, alone with my thoughts, trying to figure out your sense of identity is gone. And for me, it was, before I got hurt, I was a dad, I was a husband, I was a climber. And at the time I was a photographer. And so you're trying to figure out, like, okay, I don't know that I can ever climb again. I don't know if I can be a photographer. I can be a dad and a husband. I know those two things aren't going to go away. But, if I don't have those two things, and particularly a climber, that was a huge part of my identity, then who am I, And so for me, it was like, okay, if I'm not that, I'm going to be a dad and I'm going to be a husband. And so you're trying to get your head around, you're not thinking, at least I wasn't thinking, I'm going to come back to this to be a high level athlete again. I never thought that. I just thought, if I climb again, I just want to see if I like it. And then if I like it, I'll pursue it again. But because up to that point, most of my life had been in pursuit of this one endeavor. And so I knew that it was a huge part of my identity. And when that's gone, you just suffer these really big lows. If I'm not that, then what the hell am I? And, Cindy and I would talk about this stuff, and I would talk, play with the kids. My kids were really young at the time. They were 2 and 4. And, you're trying to, like, sort out, okay, well, I was a dad who did this, but now I don't do that. And so now what kind of a dad am I? And so what am I going to do going forward as part of, like, this big identity piece? What is going to fill that void? And I think that people rush to it. Like, I got to fill that void right now. Whereas if I could say something to myself in that bed, I would just say, pump the brakes, just relax. Everything you're going through is fluid. It's not what you're feeling today is not what's going to be the rest of your life. And I felt like at that time, this is it, man. I'm never going to get better than this. I'm going to be stuck in this world. And you're not. You're there for a piece of time. And that piece of time is not infinite. It's very small, actually. And so telling people that now is just let it happen in its own time. Don't try to force it. Don't try to rush it. Just let it evolve, because that means you're evolving too. And you're adapting and changing. And that ended up becoming really how I live my life now, is that adaptation and that change and that evolution is very important to see and recognize.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I think anyone who has been 10 stories high, right, has kind of probably had that thought of like, oh my God, this is so high. Like what would it be like to fall off? And you said 10 stories, 100 feet.
And yeah, 100 feet.
Wow. That's, I would argue that probably it's not a high percentage of people that would survive a fall.
Because they say every foot is a percentage point. So 10 feet, you have a 10% chance. 20, 30, 40, 100 feet, you technically shouldn't live because you're hitting with such force and you're doing such damage that most people don't live through those heights. I mean, shoot, I meet people who fall, 5 feet off a ladder and they're paralyzed, and that's just, to me, that's crazy. And so, yeah, the percentages are not in your favor from that height.
Wow. Do you recollect the moment you were falling? Did you have that life flash before your eyes, experience anything like that?
I didn't have the life flash. I have a very clear recollection of when I fell from the anchor, watching it go away from me. And probably the first 20 feet, I was climbers problem solve all the time. You're trying to mitigate risk. And so as I started to fall, I thought, oh, I'm going. I think there's a lot of slack in the system and it's probably going to catch me here in a minute. When you pass about 5 feet, you start to accelerate and you realize I'm still accelerating. And that was the recollection of, I think I'm falling the whole way now. And I actually pushed really hard on the cliff to kind of I wanted to see where I was going. So I pushed to tip myself over. And so I could see down the hill at that point and I could see the cliff, which is great. So you know what you're going to hit, but it's bad because it tipped me over and I was falling sideways like this, straight down. And so if you hit from 100 feet sideways, you're just going to implode. Everything's going to explode. And so for me, there's a dead tree leaning against the cliff and I came down and clipped it with my head right on this side. And that stood me back up. So from 100 feet, if you're going to land, you got to land on your feet. And the shock absorption can go somewhere. That shock wave has to dissipate and go somewhere. So it goes up through your body. That's actually how I broke my back and neck, was that compression just slams down and just destroys your discs. And that's what happened to me. And so my back is fused at L1 through 4, which is my lumbar spine. And then my neck is fused at C5, C6. And those are the areas that I broke. So if you look at any paraplegic or quadriplegic, most times their injuries are those two levels. And I destroyed both those levels. I do have a spinal cord injury, which affects my feel. Like basically the half of my body is numb and I can't feel my foot that I kept, but I shouldn't be walking. I shouldn't be doing anything. And yet here I am talking to you, climbing, doing, just crazy, weird stuff.
Wow. That's amazing. I've gotten goosebumps a few times just listening to you, man. And I mean, the way that you speak about the accident with such awareness, recollection, and acceptance, and confidence in who you are today is so inspirational, man. I just want to say that I'm proud of you. I really am. Like
Appreciate that.
That's amazing.
Amazing. I think like Jared said, like, how did you process those emotions of like when you're dealing with all that? And I remember the first time I saw myself after the amputation. I amputated 18 months after the accident because I developed this pretty bad nerve disorder and the leg was just junk. And so I went back in and amputated. And my idea was to get the quality of life back that I had before. I wanted that back so badly. And I knew I wouldn't have it in the current condition that I was in. But when I went home from the hospital after that, amputations, they do them pretty quickly. Like I went in on a Tuesday, I believe. And you're home Friday, and you're just like, they kind of send you on your way and say, okay, good luck. And Came home, was in bed a couple days. And the next time I was in the bathroom, I was standing on crutches and I saw myself in the mirror. And I think that was the biggest hit to me as far as like, oh my God, I'm not the same person I was, a year ago. I am this completely shelled, now physically disabled for the rest of my life, permanent disabilities. And you start to like, you kind of unravel, like, who the hell am I now? And I think like if I was really fortunate to have a great support network in my wife. And so she was there every day saying, this is fine. We're going to adjust. We're going to figure out what we need to do to get you moving forward. And one of the most empowering things she said to me was, if you want to climb again, I totally understand that. My wife is a core climber. She has climbed as long as I have. But if you don't want to climb, I also understand that. So whichever one you decide, we'll figure that out together. And that was really empowering because it gave me kind of license to just be who I was going to be now, whatever that looked like. And I feel like once people get their head around that, then it kind of gives you permission to be who you're going to be after these, and whatever these things are, it gives you that permission to become that new person.
Yeah, I think that's key. And we've talked about that in a couple different episodes, is allowing yourself to process all those feels and all those emotions instead of trying to hide from it or trying to suppress it either through, like a chemical means or just avoiding even thinking about it, is to me stunting you, right? Because you're not facing it, so you'll never get past it if you don't embrace it and say, okay, this is who I am. Let me figure out what can I do. So how was that first climb back? Talk to me about that, because that, to me, that's crazy courage, right? To go back to the thing that almost took your life.
Right.
Yeah, that's huge. And also on top of that, how did you come to that decision? Like before you even started climbing, like what happened to where you're like, you know what, I'm going to try to climb again?
So for me, what happened was that the accident kind of kept taking things away, so it took my health away first, then it took my ability to even just do normal things, walk, move, be able to kind of do things on my own. You're completely reliant on others at that point, from literally going to the bathroom to eating to moving to doing everything, you're reliant on someone. So the accident did that over the course of those 18 months before I went back in and amputated. What I thought was, if I amputate my leg, at least this is a decision that I get to make instead of the accident. It was actually the first one that I got to make. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to amputate my leg in hopes that I will get this quality of life back and see if I want to climb again. Not that I want to climb again, but I do want to. I don't want the accident to take that away as well. I want to decide that on my own. So we went up to Wyoming to climb at a place near Lander, Wyoming, which is one of our favorite places to go to in the summer. And we were climbing as a family. It was me and the kids and Sin, and we had another friend and his daughter there. And my daughter actually climbed this one route. It was a very short little 35-foot cliff. She climbed it. I belayed her. As I lowered her back to the ground, she came down and turned and looked at me and said, "Are you going to climb that, Dad?" And I hadn't planned on climbing at all. And it just took me by surprise. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll give it a go. And Cindy was kind of off to the side. And the guy we were there with, his name's Jeff. He's like, "I'll belay you." And I think he was as nervous as I was. So, I tie in. I'm just shaking out of my skin. I was just terrified and pull onto the rock. And I was like, oh God, this is so much. Gravity is very hard to work with. And especially when you haven't dealt with it in a year and a half to 2 years. Pull on, and I kind of shake my way up this climb for this 35 feet. And make no mistake about it, a 7-year-old had just climbed it and did fine. The dad was just terrified the whole time. I kept thinking holds were going to break, and I get to the anchor, 35, 40 feet up in the air, and it's the exact same kind of anchor that I fell from. It's 3 bolts driven into the rock with some chains, and the rope is running through some carabiners. And that's the last thing I saw when I climbed. And when I fell, that's what I watched leaving my field of view. And so when I got up there, I completely vapor locked and just couldn't let go. I just was hanging on, just thinking the entire cliff is going to tip over if I let go. It's going to rip out. Everything's going to be horrible. I'm going to hit the ground again. And my friend Jeff he's belaying me. He has the rope so tight that I literally, if I let go, I probably would have gone up. That's how hard he was pulling. But still, knowing that just couldn't let go. But what I didn't know is the cliff kind of was here, and this the hill kind of went up to the right side here, and Cindy had kind of climbed up a little bit on the right side, and so she was looking straight across at me just about. And so sound carries really well on cliffs, and she just started talking to me, and she's like, "Hey, you're fine. Jeff has you. Just go ahead and let go." And just hearing her voice and just knowing that he was down there, feeling the rope pulling, I just let go. And Jeff lowered me down to the ground. He lowered me so slowly. I swear to God, it took like an hour to get back down. Because he was just like, "Oh my God, I don't want to drop him." When I got to the ground, I remember thinking, "Okay, I'm not going to be a climber anymore. That's too scary. It's too terrifying. I can't go through that every time. There's just no freaking way." And that's part of that thing where I would tell myself, just pump the brakes. Don't paint with a big brush. Just accept it for what it was. It was the first foray back into this world. You shouldn't have expected it to go really well. You made it up a route. That's great. You didn't get hurt. That's great. So just like leave it there. But I was just like, man, there's no way. But I went and sat down, talked to Cindy, talked to the kids a little bit, and started just to remember small things. And one of the things that drew me to climbing initially was the movement of climbing. I love moving over features and making vertical progress. It fascinates me to this day because it's like kind of doing a puzzle as you're moving. And so I started to remember that. I started to remember, it was kind of cool. Like, halfway up, you grab that little block and you kind of you have to position your body in a particular way to move upward. And those were what I started to remember. And so I was like, maybe this is okay. Maybe this is something I'll keep doing. And the next day went out and climbed again, came down, swore off climbing again. Every time I would come down and just be like, "Nope, I was wrong, not doing that anymore." And that process basically just repeated for 2 years. I just would swear it off and then remember certain things and go back to it. And what happened was the windows of kind of saying no got smaller and the windows to saying yes got bigger. And so I just started to lean into it and just decided, okay, let's just see where it goes now.
Well, not only were you faced with the mental overcoming and dealing with the memory of the fall, you also had to, I'm assuming, physically change how you climb now because of the amputation.
Well, the amputation and they fused my back and neck. So I've got rods in my back and my neck is tacked together. So I can't bend and move the way you typically would. And then the prosthetic side, prosthetics are not made to rock climb.
No.
And so what I did was, they just don't service that industry very well. So what I did was talk to my guys who make my legs. And I said, "Hey, could we make a foot just that would climb?" And so we made it out of titanium, the first one, and we wrapped it in climbing rubber. And so I climbed on that, but it was like, how does this thing even work? Like, how do I put it on a rock? How do I push off of it? You don't have the range of motion. You don't have the flexibility. So it was kind of a reinvention. And I think as I look back on it, that was actually part of the fun for me. That was like, it was kind of like rediscovering climbing. It was like, I was that new climber again. So it made me really eager to go back out and like, I'm going to tweak it this way and see if that does anything. And I'm going to try it. And always, trying to be as safe as I can. Obviously your biggest concern after an injury like those is you don't want to get hurt again. And so I was always very aware of like, okay, I don't want to hurt my leg. I don't want to hurt my hand. I don't want to hurt anything. So, let's be as safe as we can and still go on these little explorations of discovery.
Wow. I'm curious to know, Craig, a lot of stories that I've heard that have a tragic accident like yours, I hear a lot of the times of people giving a lot of gratitude for the accident and saying like, if that accident didn't happen, then I would have hit rock bottom in a different way, or that accident saved my life, kind of thing. Do you feel that this accident was necessary for you to move to the next steps in your life?
Yeah, I think I fall in that camp of I would have led a fine life. You know, it would have been great. It would have been fine in every aspect. But I think what the accident did was it allowed me to become the person that I should be. I don't know that I would have hit rock bottom another way. I think what it did was it refocused my prerogatives and made me say, okay, if I'm going to be here, because I learned really how fragile we are. I think when you're younger, you think you're bulletproof. When you get older, you realize I'm probably not bulletproof. I can get hurt pretty bad. And so it made me aware of that. And it made me aware of my mortality. And it made me realize, like, I only have a small amount of time to be on this planet. And so what am I going to do with it? And I feel like if people could have that opportunity to know that, they would go through whatever they need to go through to get there, to be able to focus like that. I think that's an important thing to learn in life.
Definitely. And you said before, after that, it really helped you focus in on what are the most important things in your life. And you mentioned your wife, your kids, and climbing. And I heard you talk about speaking and that you do a lot of speaking engagements. So what are your priorities when speaking with others? What's your message? How are you sharing your story to empower others?
A lot of times what I tell people, and they'll want to hear, like, how did you overcome this and how did you overcome that? And what I tell them is that it's not necessarily that you're overcoming anything. You're learning to adapt to it. So if you go into it with the mindset of, I'm going to kick this thing's ass, you might, but you also might get your ass kicked. And so I'm more about, I learned how to adapt to my new normal. And that's what it is. It becomes your new normal. So normal before was like pretty much what you see. Everyone has, family, job, whatever. That's a normal. When you get hurt, you come back to this new normal. And my new normal became these small windows of opportunity. And so what I tell people is just accept that new normal. Don't try to just overthink it, because if you overthink it, you'll just tire yourself out. You're only going to have a small amount of time where you can really focus. So those windows get bigger, but if your focus is misguided in the beginning, it's going to be misguided when it gets bigger. So then you're just going to fall back into the same traps you had before. And that's getting caught up in things you don't really need to get caught up in. And if you can keep that focus kind of laser focused, then it's a lot easier to stay productive and happy. And so for me, learning that it was a fluid situation, learning that whatever I'm dealing with today is just today, just accept that. And good, bad, and different, it's going to pass. Especially going through these times like what we're going through now. It's like, this isn't the rest of our lives. This is a window where we can learn something and come out on the other side of it in a really positive way. And I think that as long as you go into it and know, okay, this is a small window, what am I going to learn and what am I going to take forward from it? And how do you use that as a catalyst to change yourself? Because once you change yourself, then you can actually change other things. When I got into this, when I started climbing, I wanted to be a professional climber. Didn't know how to do that. Didn't know how that actually worked. Once I got hurt and went back and did some stuff in Yosemite and some speed records and some comp climbing, companies came to me wanting to know, okay, what are you doing? How do you do it? And so that new normal and that adaptation got noticed. And so I think that's what happens is when you're doing it from this very pure, honest perspective of this is what's important to me, people notice that and they want to be around it. And so when I speak, that's what I tell people, just be honest, just be true to really who you are in this new normal situation. And people will kind of gravitate towards that for you. It actually gets kind of easy. I feel like, falling off a cliff was the hard part. Becoming who I was supposed to be was actually pretty easy because I don't think I had a choice at that point. It was just me saying, okay, this is my new normal. This is who I was supposed to be probably all along. So why don't I just lean into that and embrace it?
Yeah, you said a couple things there that really resonate with me is you're forced to be honest with yourself. And right. I think what we're going through right now, for many people, being forced to take time away from your job, being forced to, all the activities are closed, you really get a chance to be honest with yourself. And then the other thing I loved is it allowed you to become who you're supposed to be, not who you were necessarily trying to be. Right. And I think too many of us spend most of our adult lives chasing who we think we're supposed to be instead of really knowing who we are supposed to be, right? We get caught up in that rat race, the business, keeping up with everybody else. And like I shared with you guys off air earlier, for me, this time right here that we're in now is a perfect time for people to reflect, be honest with themselves, and realize that, like, at any point, your freedoms can be restricted, your jobs can go away. If you're living your life for all those things, you're not in control of those, right? And they're easily to come and go. But so I loved when you said you reflect on who you were supposed to be. And kind of, we've talked about this in other episodes, giving up control of trying to dictate all these variables in my life. And like you said, really simplifying, if I show up and I work hard and I choose to be happy, good things will come to me. I don't have the control.
That's such a basic concept that we, I think, gloss over as a society. It's like you summed it up. It's like you spend a lot of time trying to be the person you think other people think you should be, as opposed to who you think you should be. And that's a hard thing to reconcile with.
Well, because we're always in the go, right? So it's really hard to even recognize when you're moving, because you don't see it happening to you until you get a little older in life and you look back and you're like, man, I just spent 30 years chasing this retirement or chasing this pension plan, and the business went out. The bank folded, right? And I wasn't in control of it. And what did I miss in the meantime? And you've been a huge inspiration to us, Craig, watching how you raise your children, and that you've always valued experiences over what everybody else said they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
And I think, honestly, that to me is one of the good things that's going to come out of this whole circumstance we're in now, is people are going to really realize the value of each other and the value of experiences over just collecting things that sit idly by while you can't use them.
Right. Because like you said, and I have run across this, I can't even tell you how many times, but I'll use my neighbor as an example. He owned an electrical company. So was an electrician for, I think, 40 or 42 years or something. He retired. And I saw him shortly after he retired, and he broke his back. He loved to fly fish, right? Bought an RV. They were going to travel, fly fish, and he couldn't do anything. And he's like, I feel like, what the hell just happened? I worked for all this time for, like you said, like, I'm going to retire at this point and then do what I want to do and be the person I want to be. And then something like that happens and it's gone. It's just like, you just took 40 something years to do what you thought you should do. And that's admirable. But like, at the end of the day, was it what you wanted to do?
Right.
And I don't know that people will answer that question with 2 yeses. In fact, I would doubt it, because I've seen it too many times now where people go, shoot, man, I wish I knew that 30 years ago, because I wouldn't have done what I did.
Yeah, Craig, I think it's absolutely amazing that you are continuing to climb. Right? That's such a devastating and tragic accident and you even said the first few times, like, nope, not ready to go back there. But you love it so much, and there's something that you get from traversing these cliffs and being out there in nature, that even falling 100 feet is not going to stop you from doing what you truly love. You truly have found something in life that you are so passionate about. And I think that sometimes that's where people feel a lot of sadness, is they don't have something that they're truly passionate about that they would continue to do if they had a near-death experience doing it. Right? That's such a rare thing to see. So I wanted to just take a moment and ask you, how did that love develop? When was the first time you climbed? What made you fall in love with it? And maybe a little bit on how can you encourage others to find something that they love by sharing your story of how you first started to love rock climbing.
See, and I think that's a really interesting, that's a really weird thing to look at, because you want people to find something that they really click with and that resonates with them to their soul. And for me, I went to a bachelor party. A buddy of mine got married right out of high school, and he was like, instead of going to a strip club, we're going to go climbing. And he's like, are you cool with that? And I think there were 5 of us. And I was like, yeah, I knew nothing about climbing. This was 1988, I believe, or 9. And so we went to this scrappy little cliff. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and went climbing with these guys. They had these ropes set up. We started climbing, and from probably 10 minutes into it, it just completely clicked in my brain. And I was a completely unathletic kid, like suck at football, any of the popular sports, I'm horrible at them. And so I got to doing this and I was like, oh my God, this makes perfect sense to me. Like I understand what I'm supposed to do here. And so just that curiosity stayed with me of like, oh, what if I do this? What if I do that? If I move in this particular fashion, it allows me to go this way. And so learning all this cool like movement and physicality of how those two things intersect mentally was really cool to me. And so what I do now and kind of sharing that with people is I take people who have been through heavy trauma and I teach them how to climb. And what I tell people is climbing may not be the thing for you, and that's totally fine. But just be open to trying things. You know, I tell anything, whatever it is, golf, something that is out of your comfort zone. Maybe it doesn't have to be something with heights. It doesn't have to be something where you're going to get hurt. But just try things. That was my biggest thing was I didn't try anything. I did things that were expected of me as a younger person. You know, it was expected to play football, so I played football. It was expected to play baseball, so I played baseball. Did I enjoy those things? Not really. But that's what my parents wanted me to do, so I did it. And not that I regret it, but it was like wasn't really what I wanted to do. So if I had experimented earlier, I probably would have been happier earlier and found that focus. But there's really no time for it to be too late. I've taken 75-year-old, Vietnam veterans climbing, and they go, "Oh, this is amazingly fun." I'm very, they're dragging oxygen tanks with them and having a blast, right? Like it's never too late to try something, but just be open to trying those things, like whatever it is. And maybe it's not even a sport. I grew up in the art world and in photography. If that's what kind of floats your boat, throw yourself at it. Just be open to it and adapt to what that's going to be like in your life. And don't be like, well, it's kind of frowned on. People think I'm weird. Who cares, man? Who cares? Just find something that's going to excite you and capture you, and then just pursue it.
And I
love that.
Yeah, I think you said something that is great for our community to reflect upon is, and at least what I'm getting out of this, is you took responsibility to make the adaptions.
Right.
It was nobody else's job to do it for you. You weren't blaming. You weren't, if he hadn't done this would never happen, and it's this fault and that fault. You looked at yourself and you were honest, like it's up to me to adapt to my situations. And I think many of us get stuck in these ruts where we think the situations will adapt to us, that we think it's somebody else's fault. We're here. It's this right? Instead of looking and go, okay, I'm going to learn something here. I'm going to come out better, but I will adapt to this. So I love your analogy of adapting versus overcoming, right? Because you may overcome through adaptation, but if you go head on, you may lose. Right. Or you may just get stuck and never get over it because you're focused on one path over instead of adapting around it. So I think that's a fascinating concept for our community to listen and reflect on. In your current situation, are you taking the same path day in, day out, trying to overcome this obstacle, or are you being adaptive and looking for the smarter way around it?
And I think when people realize, like you said, you make that choice. And a lot of the times what I'll hear in the adaptive community or the injury community is that they're owed something. Yeah. And I think early on I was like, we're not owed anything. It's up to us. You make the choice every day. So when I get up, I have a ton of chronic pain from all the injuries I had, so I have to do things to mitigate that. So I take things to help me move, to help me kind of make my body work the way it should. I'm not owed anything, right? Those drugs are just adapting. So the climbing is adapting. All those things, I'm adapting to it. I'm not owed or I blame or there's such negative holes to go into, and you're never going to get anything out of it. All you're going to do is get bitter. And I think that when you make that choice, you can really, really, really grow at that point. And I think that most people kind of slam up against that hurdle, and they're I'm going to knock it down. I'm going to go through it, and you might go through it, but 9 times out of 10, you're probably just going to get knocked down again. And so, how many times are you going to get knocked down before you just go, I'm done, I'm done. And that's when addiction happens. That's when all these other things happen. And so it's like, man, just adapt and realize that nobody owes you anything. It's up to you. You get to make the decision what to do and what you're going to look like going forward.
One thing I love about your story, Craig, is that you had to fall in love with your passion twice, right? Once when you first came with it and at the bachelor party, and then again after the accident when your daughter asked you, "Hey, Dad, are you going to climb this?" And I think the message is beautiful. I read something recently that said passion is the result of action. In other words,
Oh,
we
wow.
need to try things to find out that we're passionate about it. We can't
Right.
watch I can't watch Craig Demartino climb a rock and be like, "Oh man, I love rock climbing. That's what I'm meant to do." I mean, there might be a spark, but I'm not going to really
Yeah,
know unless I get in that harness and start climbing and feel it for myself. And I think so much, especially today, don't get me wrong, the digital world is beautiful. We wouldn't be able to communicate right now
yeah,
if it weren't for the digital world. But I think that sometimes we're so digital and we make these assumptions of, oh, that's not for me, or I wouldn't like that. And I love the fact that your story, I mean, you've probably tried more things than a lot of people. Just hearing that you've been in the arts realm, photography, art, you did football, you did baseball, you do rock climbing. Most people probably have never done all of these things, right? We have this kind of assumption, if I didn't like football, so I'm not a sports person. I'm not that. So I love the message of not only adapting, but getting out there and trying it, even when you've literally fallen off a cliff. So
exactly.
so so, so that's amazing and very empowering. Love it.
And I actually feel, I mean, this is going to sound weird, but like, I actually feel really fortunate to have discovered it twice. To kind of that rediscovery, I think was actually richer than when I found it the first time, because all of a sudden I was like, oh, I know what this should be, but now it's going to be this. And so, wow, it's actually quite a bit more interesting to me because I have to learn how to do things. I'll go and do these problems or routes that I had done as an able-bodied climber, and I'll try to redo them as a disabled climber. And that's fascinating to me to go, oh, my body used to do this, and now I have to do something completely different. So what is that going to be? And so it's kind of a neat discovery journey for me, and continues. And it's, I think, just one of the really cool, fortunate things that came out of the accident.
Yeah, and I mean, I believe that would probably make you one of the most a depth climbers in the sport of having knowledge, doing it able body now as an
Yeah.
amputee, to where you can probably teach it so well because you know it from multiple angles. So
Right.
wow, I've definitely been inspired, Craig. I really appreciate it. It's been amazing. I think it's two of the biggest takeaways for me from your episode is to really go out and try things. Go do it. Go try and fall in love with passions. And if you don't like it, it's okay. You're gonna adapt. And to be adaptive, right? I really like how you choose. I mean, even with your organization, Adaptive Adventures, to use the word adapt instead of overcome, and to play the best hand that you can with what you're dealt. So really appreciate it, and just want you to know that I'm inspired and I'm super proud of you. Amazing story.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Appreciate both you guys.
For sure. It's our pleasure to get to share these stories with the community. And honestly, like Ali and I said, we get to deliver this to our community, but we get so much from it as well. And we're so grateful. So where can people follow you, Craig? Where can we send them to stay in touch with your story?
They can go to my website, which is just craigdemartino.com. They can find me on Instagram at craigdem, CraigDem. And Facebook is just my name, Craig Demartino. And then the nonprofit I work with, like Ali said, is Adaptive Adventures, and they're based in Denver. And I do climbing programs for them. They do 10 different sports, but I do climbing programs for them with civilians and veterans who have a physical disability, and I take them climbing. So they can come to a climbing clinic with me and learn to climb. They don't have to be, a disabled individual, especially veterans. We encourage them to come out and try these different sports and hang out and just kind of see what they can do in their new normal.
Very cool. And you have a quote that you share quite a bit, and I'm not going to lie, I've stolen it from you a few times.
I think I've stolen it from someone too, so don't feel bad.
And I love it. And I think you are a perfect example of living this, that life is 10% your circumstances and 90% your reaction.
Yeah. And I can't, man, I heard that. I was still in the hospital, and I remember thinking like, oh, I should probably pay attention to that. That's probably very important information to have. And I've just tried to use that in my everyday life, where, those circumstances are going to be whatever they're going to be. it's up to me to decide what I'm going to do with it and how I'm going to use it or not use it, and use it as a catalyst for change and for adaptation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us, Craig.
My pleasure, you guys. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.